My daughter came home crying after being invited to a Christmas party at my in-laws. When I asked her what happened, she silently handed me a gift-wrapped present. "Mom, look at this." "Why? Why do I have to go through this?" I was speechless when I hurriedly checked inside. This is not a present for a child. I rushed to the police and asked them to catch the person who gave this to my daughter. As a result, the police action exposed the sender's wrongdoing. It turned into a big commotion involving relatives, and the sender received a punishment like the end of the world. I'm in my 40s, and my husband works at the same company in his 30s. I joined the current company as a mid-career hire when I was in my mid-30s. At my previous job, I decided to change jobs when my boss, at a party, called me an old maid for not being married at 30. The current company values merit over gender or age. My husband, who became my direct supervisor, took care of me when I joined. We had a shotgun wedding and now have a daughter in 3rd grade. She's a quiet girl who loves reading and is kind to everyone. My husband has a sister who is a troublesome figure, and my relationship with her is far from good. Luckily, I have a good relationship with my in-laws, so things are somewhat smooth. My sister-in-law, who adores her brother, my husband, seems to dislike that I, older than my husband, am his wife. She looked down on me for having a shotgun wedding. An old hag having a shotgun wedding seems like you're just overflowing with sexual desire. Gross. Despite saying that, she used to come over frequently when we first got married. Having a baby at an older age means it's harder to get your body back. I wish my brother would be disillusioned seeing your wrinkled, saggy belly. She'd laugh at my big belly, suggesting it might sag to the floor. I was even told I'd go gray from the stress of childbirth. In the end, she'd always leave saying, "Just age more and get dumped by my brother." I try to ignore her, but feel inferior being older than my husband. So, I try to distract myself and not take it to heart. But it's not like I'm not hurt. Sometimes, her mean laughter haunts me. Then, shortly before I was due, her pregnancy was revealed, and she too had a shotgun wedding. It seemed she had no capacity to worry about others, so my sister-in-law stopped coming to our house, and the chances of us seeing each other dropped abruptly. As she moved to another city after marrying and living with my in-laws, I was relieved not to be exposed to her sarcasm anymore. Now I could focus on my childbirth. I later gave birth to a healthy baby girl. The birth of my daughter was a bit tough and took some time, but I got courage from my husband holding my hand and encouraging me the whole time. When our daughter's first cry echoed in the delivery room, my husband thanked me and said, "You did great," and we both cried tears of joy. 7 months after our daughter was born, my sister-in-law had a baby boy. Then, she started coming to our house, a 1-hour drive each way, just to make snide comments to me. Moreover, the comparisons she made were between our children. It's obvious that a kid born to an older mom would have a wrinkled face. My kid's skin is so smooth, isn't it? The age of the mother at birth really affects the child. Can you believe she'd say that? I was just dumbfounded. At that point, I was too busy with new parenting challenges to pay much attention to her snide remarks. The problem was that she never brought any baby supplies with her. She'd come without spare diapers or formula, and then take a bunch home, saying she didn't want to run out. She'd even take home an unopened formula as if it was the most natural thing in the world. I was really baffled by her behavior of coming to insult me and then taking things home. But then she stopped coming. My husband said that her husband's job involves frequent transfers, and they moved to a different state. We had some peaceful times until our daughter started elementary school and found out her cousin, my sister-in-law's son, was also enrolled there. We moved back here because of my husband's job transfer. I knew then that my peace was over. Regardless of our relationship, my daughter and her cousin got along well. My daughter, being bigger and very sincere and kind, took good care of her cousin. He, on the other hand, was very popular and always surrounded by friends. When they reached the 3rd grade, they ended up in the same class. One day, my daughter won an award for a reading reflection she wrote for a summer project. Even got published in the newspaper. The whole family and relatives were talking about it. The school they attend operates on a trimester system, with a 1-week break between summer and winter breaks. We were visiting my in-laws during that time. This time, perhaps because they heard my daughter's reading reflection had won an award, there were relatives present who usually don't get together. But my sister-in-law didn't like that our family was the center of attention. "It's not fair. That book was supposed to be for my son, but your daughter took it." The truth was, they had just swapped books. They couldn't decide which book they wanted to read, so they agreed to swap after finishing. After each of them finished reading the 2 books, they discussed and decided together which book report they would write. My nephew liked the book my daughter read first, so she let him have it. When I explained this, my sister-in-law accused me of writing the reflection for my daughter. Actually, I used to write novels as a hobby in college. She must have heard from my husband about that. Unknown to me, my sister-in-law was spreading rumors among the parents at school that I had a connection with one of the judges and had asked for a favor for my daughter's writing competition. My daughter heard the rumors and was downcast. Seeing her so downcast that she even stopped reading her favorite books, I had reached the limit of my patience. I couldn't stand it anymore, seeing her so upset not just over me, but now she was the target of the mean comments. I wanted to discuss everything that had happened with my in-laws, but I first confessed everything to my husband. For the first time, I told him everything his sister had done to me since we got married. She had even taken clothes I bought for my daughter when she was a baby. "Babies can't tell the difference between boys' and girls' clothes," she would say. She even hit me and called me fat when I was pregnant, saying I looked like a sumo wrestler and should try a sumo stomp. My husband was furious, saying it's not something to say to a pregnant woman and that his sister's actions were like theft. He decided we should share this with his parents, and he would be the one to tell them. Then, my husband and his parents went to my sister-in-law's house together. She was surprised to see her parents suddenly, but was overjoyed to see her beloved older brother. However, she ended up getting a harsh lecture from him and started to resent me. "You snitched to my favorite brother, you old hag. Acting like a tragic heroine must feel good, right? It's the worst for me, though. Take responsibility, you old maid." At first, I answered her calls thinking she was apologizing, but it was just her venting her grudges. After that, I set her calls to go straight to voicemail and ignored them. The calls stopped after about half a month. I thought she got bored since I wasn't responding, but I found out later that wasn't the case. In December, a children's Christmas party was organized at my in-laws. It was the first time they did something like that, so I wondered why this year, but my daughter was excited to receive an invitation. She had fond memories of a Christmas party at her kindergarten and thought elementary school would have one too. However, her school didn't do it because of their stance on religious events. Why bother with religious reasoning when Christmas has evolved in its own unique way? I thought, but apparently, some parents are quite fussy about it. I told my daughter we should do it at home, and we had our own family celebration last year. She enjoyed exchanging gifts at the party. The invitation for the party at my in-laws stated that we should prepare a gift within a $20 budget. My daughter and I spent time at a nearby large shopping mall choosing the present. She picked out one of her favorite picture books, hoping to share her thoughts with whoever received it. On the day of the Christmas party, she carefully held the present she picked and happily headed to my in-laws. Their house is a 10-minute bus ride from the bus stop, a minute's walk from our house. I let my mother-in-law know my daughter was coming, and she offered to pick her up. 10 minutes later, my mother-in-law called to say my daughter arrived at her house, and I finally relaxed. But 30 minutes after that, everything changed. I thought my daughter would be enjoying the Christmas party by now, but suddenly I heard the front door open. It was a weekday, and my husband was at work. I was working from home because my daughter was on winter break. The door opening unexpectedly alarmed me, so I hurried to the entrance, only to find my daughter sitting on the floor, crying. I asked her what happened, and she handed me a gift-wrapped bag. She said I would understand once I looked inside, so I took out the contents. Inside was a torn-up newspaper with my daughter's reading reflection printed on it, along with a message card. The card, written in red ink, said, "If you get too cocky, you and your family will end up like this stuffed animal." There were also patterns that looked like blood splatters. Peeking further inside, there was a stuffed animal that had been torn to pieces and splattered with red ink. This was too malicious to be a joke. There's no way my daughter would coincidentally receive such a gift during the exchange. When I asked her what it meant, she said my sister-in-law had prepared this special present for her. This time, the Christmas party was meant to be child-focused, so we had all agreed as a family that adults should refrain from personally preparing gifts. That's why I didn't accompany my daughter. Yet, there was my sister-in-law at my in-laws' house. Knowing what she had done to me and my daughter, my mother-in-law would have informed me if my sister-in-law was there. This meant she was there without my mother-in-law noticing. "Didn't you tell Grandma?" My mother-in-law had always said to let her know if her daughter did or said anything to us. I had also communicated this to my daughter. I tried to tell her, but my aunt grabbed my hand and said she didn't call for me. She said only children with a connection to missionary schools were allowed. My daughter asked, "What's a missionary school?" and I was at a loss for words. It was just this spring. One of our relatives had passed the entrance exam for a missionary school. And it was a big topic of conversation. My sister-in-law's son also went to a missionary kindergarten. There were also stories about relatives who didn't know they were attending a missionary school until they enrolled, making us realize many of us had connections to such schools. We sent our daughter to a local kindergarten and a neighborhood elementary school. My sister-in-law must have thought this topic would be a way to scold my daughter. I told my daughter to stay inside and, with the gift she received in hand, I rushed to the police station alone. I argued that it was a serious threat, but the police suggested resolving the matter within the family. However, I insisted that threats can be valid even among family members or siblings. Not only were there threatening words, but also a threatening letter and a mutilated stuffed animal, which I argued was malicious. That's when a female police officer happened by. She pointed out that threats and violence within a family are still reportable offenses. The female officer took over, empathizing with how scared my daughter and I must have been. After I provided my sister-in-law's address, she promised to go and warn her right away. My wishes were fulfilled in the end, but I shudder to think what might have happened if that officer hadn't passed by. It was disheartening to realize that some in the police still won't act unless it's an actual incident or accident. I wondered how I could protect my daughter in case of an emergency. That evening, when my husband returned from work, I told him everything that happened. He was furious with his sister for ruining our daughter's fun out of spite. He immediately called his parents to protest, since the Christmas party was happening at their house and they supposedly didn't know anything about it. They claimed they had no idea my sister-in-law was there. They had left the back door unlocked, so she might have entered that way. My mother-in-law apologized for not paying attention to the comings and goings of people as she was busy picking up other grandchildren nearby. My father-in-law had been away at work during the day. The Christmas party was mainly organized by the middle school-aged nephews and nieces, and my mother-in-law had mostly left it to them. Apparently, the police officer had firmly warned my sister-in-law later. From what I heard, she was told that any further reports could lead to more than just a warning, so things should be fine for the most part. However, my in-laws were distressed by my sister-in-law's actions, which had gone so far as to involve the police. It could potentially lead to criminal behavior. Consequently, they called a meeting with both our family and my sister-in-law's family, with the parents present for discussion. When we arrived at the designated time at my in-laws' house, my sister-in-law and her husband hadn't shown up yet. They finally appeared right at the last minute, with my sister-in-law clearly sulking. It was obvious she wasn't remorseful and was resenting me for calling the police. Her husband, sitting next to her, looked clueless about why they were summoned. He seemed to have been called without being informed of the reason. During the discussion, he was shocked to hear for the first time about all the things his wife had done to our family. Unaware that things had gotten to this point, my sister-in-law's husband profusely apologized to us, feeling sorry. My in-laws, seeing his reaction, asked my sister-in-law if she had anything to say, but she just responded with "not really." She didn't seem to understand why she needed to apologize, acting as if she hadn't done anything wrong. "I didn't do anything bad. The police came but didn't arrest me, right? So that means I didn't do anything wrong." Everyone else was dumbfounded by her logic. This is what they mean by being so shocked that you can't close your mouth. It seemed like a waste of time just lecturing her. Then, out of the blue, my sister-in-law's husband declared he was divorcing her. We were all puzzled because it seemed like they had a good marriage. Responding to our surprised looks, he confessed he had reached his limit with her behavior since they got married. He hadn't complained about her not doing housework during pregnancy, and he hadn't scolded her for neglecting childcare and going out to have fun, thinking it was stress from being a new parent. But her carelessness with housework once led to a small fire. It forced them to move. She, being vain, had insisted on their son attending a prestigious kindergarten when she heard other neighborhood kids were applying. But he didn't get in due to a lack of preparation. Embarrassed, she forced another move. While his job did involve transfers, they weren't as frequent as their moves suggested. He revealed that the frequent moves were not just because of his job transfers, but also to maintain my sister-in-law's image. After failing the kindergarten entrance exam, she tried to get him into an international kindergarten, and when that didn't work out, they barely managed to get him into a missionary kindergarten. Choosing a public elementary school was only because their son wanted it. And my sister-in-law reluctantly agreed after her husband supported their son's wishes. He feared their son would be sacrificed for her vanity and had been considering divorce already. With her harassment coming to light, he felt he had no other choice but to announce it now. My sister-in-law, somewhat aware of her actions, didn't dispute what he said, but seemed taken aback by the divorce. "Wait! What do you mean divorce? You never showed any signs of this." Suddenly, she started apologizing to us, thinking it would help. "It was just a joke, right? Just a little prank. I never thought you'd take it seriously." A joke? A prank? That's something done among people who have trust. My daughter knows all about what you've done to me. How could she take it as a joke? Moreover, that hostile message was too much for a third grader. Even adults would be scared to go outside if someone threatened them. I told her that. Her husband criticized her, asking if she could say the same thing to her own child, and said her actions were unimaginable for a parent. Just because someone is a parent doesn't mean they have parental feelings. There are people who can't be real parents. And she is probably one of them. My husband, seeing her crying, told her sternly that crying wouldn't fix anything at her age and that she needed to stop thinking tears would get her out of trouble. She cried even more, insisting she did nothing wrong and wasn't to blame. Why am I the only one being blamed? Is everyone ganging up on me? It's all because my brother married an older woman. My brother's wife should be smart, beautiful, and dote on me. Our marriage and her harassment are totally separate issues, right? We already thought she was a bit off, but even my husband was astonished at her stupidity. No one tried to comfort the inconsolable sister-in-law. The discussion couldn't continue, so we decided to adjourn for the day. Her husband had to drag her to the car and take her home. Their divorce eventually happened, but it was a messy affair due to her stubborn refusal to agree. Her son's accidental revelation might have been a factor in her agreeing to the divorce. He, without any malicious intent, simply shared what he saw with his friends. However, the parents who heard the rumor did not remain silent. After winter break, at school, my nephew talked about having a Christmas party with his older cousins. It seems that at school, they used a class to have a presentation about their winter break memories. Among stories about what they did on New Year's Day and video game consoles they received as Christmas gifts. We all exchanged presents. Then I saw my mom giving my cousin a special present just for her, and I thought it was unfair. When the teacher asked what kind of present it was, my nephew described exactly what he saw.
I saw it. The cute stuffed animal was all torn up with lots of red stuff on it, like blood.
The story became a topic of discussion among the school teachers, and it escalated into a major issue after the children who heard it went home and told their parents. My daughter, with her heart still hurt, hasn't been able to go back to school since the Christmas party. Since everyone knew that my daughter and her cousin were related, they speculated that her absence was related to the incident. Of course, that was the case, but I wished it had remained unnoticed and left undisturbed. I had intended to wait until my daughter was ready to go to school on her own accord. Her cousin didn't share the story to be funny, but rather to find a way to stop his mom's terrible behavior. He, too, was pained by her actions. Learning this, her husband realized he couldn't delay the divorce any longer and agreed to her demands in exchange for her consent to the divorce. By then, she had become infamous in the neighborhood as the woman who threatened children, and no one would associate with her. She was even pelted with garbage when walking outside and, feeling cornered, agreed to the divorce, thinking returning to her parents' home would end her nightmare. Her husband had no intention of giving up custody, but she readily relinquished it.
I'll remarry someone much better than you. Kids are a nuisance when remarrying, so I don't need him.
She even said this in front of her son. But he stood up to her.
I don't need a terrible mom like you. I have a cool dad, and that's enough. Never show your face to my cousin again.
She left with a final retort, "You'll regret this later." However, it was my sister-in-law who ended up in tears. When she triumphantly returned to her parents' house, they turned her away at the gate, banning her from ever showing her face there again. With nowhere to go, she resorted to spending nights with random men in exchange for meals and a place to stay. When she couldn't find a man, she borrowed money from dangerous sources and spent her nights out, accumulating a massive debt. Her debts became so overwhelming that no amount of part-time work could cover them, and eventually, she disappeared. My husband and his parents decided not to file a missing persons report, reasoning she's not a child anymore. They agreed it's better this way, not willing to take care of her if she returns. Since then, my daughter has been able to go back to school on her own. Her former brother-in-law didn't move, so her cousin still attends the same school. He now says it's his turn to protect her, and they have become closer than ever. This has led to a deeper friendship between us and my former brother-in-law, as our children have brought us together. My in-laws, calling both my daughter and their grandson their dear grandchildren, step in as guardians when he can't do to work. With my sister-in-law gone, there's no more tension, and we have built a very trusting and reliable family relationship.
What's a country bumpkin like you doing here?
I'm here to celebrate my brother's wedding. We invited you because you're family, but you don't really belong here. If I were a man, I'd never want to marry someone like you. Then, they started making fun of my parents. It's odd, right? An elite like your brother being born to a family of farmers. Please, don't insult my parents anymore. I couldn't stay silent. Maybe he was adopted from somewhere. Are you sure you won't regret saying more?
Huh. Why would I regret it? It's you who should. Country folk like you are such a hassle. Can't you just go away?
Then please accept this, and I'll leave. The next moment, she brushed off the envelope of money. It fell to the floor.
I couldn't possibly accept something like this from a poor person.
But, it's a wedding gift.
That's the problem with dirty farmers' daughters like you. Don't you know? Wedding gifts should be at least $6,000. What are you talking about?
Confused, I listened as my sister-in-law continued.
Well, you couldn't possibly afford $6,000. You're not an elite like me.
She laughed loudly, not caring about the people around us. The other guests started murmuring. My sister-in-law really didn't understand anything. Then, my father came up from behind. Here, I have $60,000. Is that enough?
What?
Looking at my surprised sister-in-law, my father burst into laughter. Confused and not understanding what was happening, my sister-in-law. I told you so. And so, my sister-in-law went from happiness to hell in an instant. My name is Katherine Johnson, and I work at a city hall while also helping with farming on weekends. My parents, who are farmers, struggled but managed to support my brother Chris and me through college. I'm still grateful for that. You don't have to do that. That's right. Live your life the way you want, Katherine. It's okay. I've already decided. After graduating from college, I returned to my hometown. I wanted to give back to my parents in some way. That's why I help with the farming. However, my brother Chris had the opposite view. I still remember what he said on the day of his college graduation. I'm never coming back to this godforsaken place. My parents and I were shocked and speechless. I couldn't believe he had been harboring such feelings. After that, he didn't contact us much and never returned. Then one Saturday, after finishing the farming work and returning home, I saw a familiar face. Well, long time no see. Brother. The brother I saw after several years had an air of elitism about him. Still getting dirty in the dirt, huh? Must be tough. I do it because I like it. And you? What brings you here? At this time, my brother wasn't alone. He had brought along someone who seemed to be his girlfriend. I remember thinking she looked elite and had the air of a lady. This is Emily, my fiancée. Fiancée. Just here to introduce her today. Didn't really want to come, but well. I greeted this Emily. I'm his sister, Katherine. Nice to meet you. Don't come too close, you're dirty. What? What if my clothes get dirty? That's typical for country folks. I was definitely annoyed but didn't say anything. This was my first encounter with Emily, who would later become my sister-in-law. Then my brother and his fiancée went to greet my father. I'm planning to marry this Emily. I see. But one thing I want to make clear, I have no intention of coming back here, and I absolutely don't want to deal with caregiving. Wait a minute, brother. I was silenced by a gesture from our father. That's fine. But if that's the case, I won't be able to leave anything for you. Is that okay? I don't care. There's nothing good about inheriting a house or farm in the countryside. Understood. I have no objections to your marriage. However, the next words from Emily's mouth were beyond anything we could have imagined. Excuse me, may I ask something? What's up? How do you even live in such a filthy house? Excuse me? I couldn't help but let out an astonished voice. From her expression, she seemed genuinely curious. However, my father, unfazed and without irritation, answered calmly. Well, our family has been farming for generations. We grow and sell vegetables. I see. So, you're basically peasants. I could never do something like that. My brother, standing beside her, was desperately trying to hold back his laughter. Seeing them like this, I thought to myself what kind of people they were. My mother, sitting next to my father, had been looking down the whole time. It was truly sad. That's the way it is, I guess. Did I say something weird? Oh, no. Don't worry about it. As we were about to see them off. You are Katherine, right? Yes, that's me. If you stay in a place like this, you'll never get married. It's a shame, you're quite pretty. I guess so. No, she fits right in with this place. See ya. After that, the two of them left, seemingly pleased with themselves. Have they left? Yeah. They were the worst. More than I imagined. How can someone even talk like that? They must have been really pampered. Honestly, I don't ever want to meet them again. After that, I didn't hear from my brother. As work got busier, I almost forgot about my brother's marriage. Then, in our local government, I was chosen for a project to elevate the status of agriculture, which they had mocked. My involvement in farming played a big part in this.
Wow, that's impressive. Indeed. What exactly will you be doing? Things like securing sales channels, promoting our crops nationwide, and so on. If it's successful, it should make life easier for you too.
You don't have to worry about us. That's right. You don't need to go to such lengths for us, Catherine.
It's okay, I want to do this.
My parents seemed a bit happy despite insisting it wasn't necessary. Their kind nature often led them to face hardships. But I realized they didn't need to continue struggling like this. Another reason I was so invested in this project was to ensure those two couldn't complain ever again. About 6 months had passed since then. What brings you here? I was just about to head to the field.
Still dressed like that? Don't you find it embarrassing? Are you saying that all the farmers nationwide should feel embarrassed?
What? While I was arguing with my brother, a man approached us from behind. Easy there, Chris. Calm down. I'm sorry, James. Father-in-law? Come on, hurry up and show us inside. I led them to our parents as instructed by my brother.
Nice to meet you. I'm James Anderson, Emily's father.
Thank you for coming all this way to our place. We're here today to discuss their wedding. Then my parents started discussing the wedding plans with him. The plan was to leave most of the decisions to the couple. We learned that Emily's mother had passed away when she was young, and she was raised solely by her father. And her father owned a chain of restaurants nationwide. Look at the time. I would have loved to chat more, but I have another appointment. That's all right. Please prioritize your schedule. With that, I must take my leave. Saying so, Emily's father left in a luxury car that was waiting outside. And my brother and his fiancée remained. This gave me an uneasy feeling.
You really shouldn't be associating with people like him.
You don't have to say it like that. I'm just speaking the truth. I then posed a simple question to my brother. By the way, how did you meet Emily? Ah, I guess I never told you. She's a colleague at my company. She's an elite, just like me. Elite? You might not understand. She's competent at her job and has a lot of trust from her superiors. My brother indeed had graduated from a prestigious university and landed a job at a major corporation. Despite the frustration, it was true that he was exceptionally talented. I wondered if this was what fueled his arrogance. So, you fell for Emily at first sight when you happened to meet her there?
Yeah, that's right.
Well, that's it then. Are you satisfied?
Yes, thank you.
I wished he had chosen someone more decent, but of course, I kept that thought to myself. Sensing this, Emily seemed to look down on us even more. My father didn't say anything, but he probably didn't want to come here. That's true. My father-in-law is kind. So, don't get it wrong, okay? He recognizes only Chris, not you guys. Don't do anything embarrassing from now on. Feeling the need to speak up for my silent parents, I confronted them. Why can you only say such things? What? You shouldn't talk to your parents like that, Chris.
I never asked to be raised, did I? What is that supposed to mean?
I was reaching my limit of tolerance. Noticing this, my father stepped in.
That's enough. We don't have any intention of doing anything.
Looks like my dad understands better than you, Catherine. Then, Emily targeted my mother. I've been wanting to say this, but I think you should dress better. Me?
If the parents look shabby, it reflects poorly on Chris. He's going to become more important.
Glancing at my father, I saw his fists clenched with frustration. He especially hated seeing my mother belittled. Even by his son's wife. Dad? Oh, yes. Anyway, Emily is right. Stop messing around in the dirt and pay attention to other things. I doubt country folks can manage that. The two laughed heartily. Seeing this, I almost lost my cool. In the end, Chris and Emily left, continuing to mock us. This time, we didn't even bother to see them off. This time, they really got on my nerves. I thought you were going to lose it. That goes for you too, Catherine. You had quite the expression near the end. Me? Really? Mother joined the conversation. You two have always been like that. Not really. The scariest person in this house is definitely Mom. That's not true. Catherine's right. Especially right after we got married. Hey. Your reaction says it all. Despite the terrible start, I felt our bond as a family had deepened. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Chris. Hello?
Catherine, it's me. We just submitted our marriage certificate. We're officially husband and wife now.
I thought you were already married. Well, congratulations. About the wedding, it's set for 3 months from now. I guess I'll invite you guys.
Family should be there by default.
Well, I wouldn't mind if you weren't, but we're inviting a lot of people. It wouldn't look good if our parents didn't show up. That's the only reason for inviting us? I couldn't help but feel a sense of clarity. I'll let Mom and Dad know.
Good. And make sure to wear something decent, okay? No muddy clothes. As if I'd go dressed like that.
Just saying. With that, Chris ended the call. At that moment, I thought he'd eventually learn his lesson. No, I wanted to give him a taste of his own medicine. Soon after, there was progress in the project I was working on. The highlight was inviting a famous restaurant owner to see the local produce, including vegetables and meat. If successful, this could secure a distribution channel. Of course, my parents were involved in this as well. Are you sure everything will be okay? I'm indeed a bit worried. On the day of the event, my parents seemed nervous.
Don't worry. Our vegetables are fresh and delicious, they're well known for that. Have more confidence.
Yes, you're right.
I have some preparations to do, so I'll head to the venue first.
Understood. An hour later, the event began. Various vegetables harvested by local farmers were displayed, and restaurant owners and chefs were sampling them. After a while, it seemed some contracts were successfully established. Maybe we shouldn't have come.
Don't be so pessimistic. We're just getting started.
Still. Then, someone approached us. Dad. What's up? My father looked up. And there was Emily's father, Mr. Anderson.
Nice to see you again. I had a feeling you'd be here.
We're a bit embarrassed to be seen like this. No. May I try some of these vegetables? Of course, please do. Mr. Anderson seriously tasted the vegetables we grew. My father and I exchanged glances, feeling the weight of each second.
Wow. These are all excellent. I'd like to use them in my restaurants. Really? That would be wonderful. Absolutely. This has nothing to do with our children's marriage. Everything was delicious. Thank you so much.
And that's how we secured the contract. This will surely make my daughter happy. At that moment, an idea struck me. I have a request. What is it? I'd like to keep this a secret from my brother and your daughter for now. I think it will be more surprising when the right time comes. I was a bit worried if this proposal would be acceptable. I see, a surprise then.
Yes, exactly.
Understood, I'll keep it a secret.
Thank you so much.
My father whispered to me from behind. Is this okay? Yes, I think so. Mr. Anderson doesn't seem to know their true nature yet. Revealing it at the right moment could be interesting.
That could indeed turn out to be quite entertaining.
Right? Perhaps, in some way, it felt like a sign that fortune hadn't abandoned us. Following that, things went surprisingly smoothly, and we started supplying our vegetables to the restaurants owned by Emily's father. Given his nationwide chain, the volume was substantial. We were busy, but the income was significant. Then the wedding day arrived. Determined not to be ridiculed, we dressed in new, fine clothes and headed to the venue. We were astonished upon arriving at the wedding hall. It was not just grand, but the number of guests was far beyond a mere 100. Overwhelmed, we were approached by Emily.
"What are country folks like you doing here?"
"We're here to celebrate my brother's wedding."
"We invited you because you're family, but you really don't belong here. Just don't cause any trouble."
"We won't."
"How would you know? Country folks like you probably have never been to such a place."
I couldn't imagine marrying someone like her if I were a man. Then, she started to mock my parents again. "It's so strange, isn't it? An elite like your brother being born to a family of farmers. Please, don't insult my parents any further." I couldn't stay silent. Maybe he was adopted from somewhere. "Do you really want to regret saying more?"
"Ha! Why would I regret it? It's you who should. This is why country folks are such a hassle. Can't you just go away?"
"Then please accept this, and I'll leave." At that moment, I brushed off the envelope of money. It fell to the floor. I couldn't possibly accept something like that from a poor person. But, it's a wedding gift.
That's the problem with dirty farmers' daughters like you. Don't you know? Wedding gifts should be at least $6,000. What are you talking about?
Confused, I listened as Emily continued to berate me.
Well, you probably can't afford $6,000, right?
You'd go broke. Emily, unfazed by the onlookers, began laughing loudly. The other guests started murmuring, clearly disconcerted by her behavior. She really didn't understand anything. Then, my father appeared from behind. "Here, I have $60,000. Is this okay?"
"What?"
Emily, shocked, watched as my father burst into laughter. "Are you satisfied now?" Confused and not understanding what was happening, Emily stood there baffled. "I told you so." Then Chris rushed over.
"What happened?"
"Ask Emily."
"Emily, what happened? Explain."
Pointing at the $60,000 my father had offered, Emily was at a loss for words. "What's this money for?" "It's our wedding gift." "You said you couldn't accept less than $60,000. "What?" "For now, why don't you take Emily away? We're attracting too much attention here." Chris, still puzzled, led Emily away. Then Mr. Anderson, Emily's father, approached us. "What was that all about just now?" "Well, actually," I explained everything to him. He held his head in his hands. "Where did I go wrong in raising her? After her mother passed, I guess I didn't pay enough attention. It might be that, but it's probably not just that. I'm truly sorry," he apologized sincerely. I then made a suggestion. "All right, let's go with that plan. Dad, are you okay with this? Let's leave it to Catherine." The wedding ceremony began. Chris and Emily looked somber. After the church ceremony, we were in the dressing room. The guests were already seated at the reception. This was the only chance. I had a microphone that I had arranged with the staff beforehand. Turning it on without Chris and Emily noticing, I was ready to speak. "Explain what that was all about earlier." "What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb. I mean the money. That money is what we earned." "Right, Dad?" "Yes, that's right."
There's no way a poor farming family could come up with that kind of money.
Emily was desperately trying to argue her point. "That's right. It's definitely strange. There's nothing strange about it. That was a legitimate payment. We've been quiet about it, but we've contracted with a famous restaurant to supply our produce. There's nothing odd about that, is there?"
What kind of restaurant would take produce from such a dirty place? It must be some low-grade place. Yeah, exactly.
Our family couldn't help but laugh at their ludicrous assertions. "What's so funny?" "Just wondering if you really think it's okay to say such things. You think you can mock us?" "My father is." "Of course, we know. But what if your father is the one who has a contract with us?
That's impossible.
Well, you could always ask him to know for sure, right? Just then, Mr. Anderson, Emily's father, walked in through the door. Dad? Mr. Anderson.
Tell these filthy people off.
Mr. Anderson let out a deep sigh. What a foolish daughter. What? Everything Catherine's saying is true. I didn't realize things were this bad. That can't be true, can it? I have no reason to lie. And I've heard all about what's been going on. Chris, sensing trouble, started to make excuses. It's not like that. I was thinking of you, Mr. Anderson. Thinking of me? Ah, well, excuses are unbecoming.
Shut up. You just stay out of this.
Is that the right thing to say? I then showed Chris the hidden microphone I had been holding. A microphone? Guess where it's connected to?
No way.
Too late to realize now. I then handed the microphone to Emily's father, Mr. Anderson. He began to address the gathered guests. Everyone, thank you for gathering here today despite your busy schedules. However, as you have just heard, we will make a formal apology at a later date. Next, I passed the microphone to my father. I am the groom's father. My son is a despicable man who insults even his parents, sitting complacently in his own arrogance. We cannot continue to disgrace ourselves in front of you. We appreciate if you could leave this matter in our hands and kindly exit the venue.
What are you saying? There are company CEOs here.
It's too late now. Everyone already knows.
There's still time. Chris blurted out and rushed out of the room, but he couldn't stop the departing guests.
Following him, I found Chris collapsed on his knees in the empty hall. Too bad, brother. But you brought this on yourself. Since when did you plan all this? Who knows? I've forgotten.
You.
Emily ran to him. What do we do now? Emily. We'll always be together, right? Of course. The sight of Emily in her wedding dress and Chris in his tuxedo embracing each other was indescribably poignant. If this were a scene from a drama, it would be picture perfect. I was thinking about all this. Then, my father and the others came up to me. Now, you two must manage on your own. Exactly. We won't help you anymore. You're adults and should live by your own means.
We can't survive like that.
You were pampered too much. I won't be around forever. This is just happening sooner than expected.
Oh, no.
Emily collapsed, sobbing. Don't worry, brother. You said you didn't need help, right?
You're abandoning me?
Don't be mistaken. You were the one who first abandoned our family. Now it's time for you two to manage on your own. Leaving them there, we walked out of the venue. I'm truly sorry for my daughter's behavior. The same goes for us. We're sorry. Please, let us invite you to our restaurant. It's not enough to make up for this, but that's not necessary. We'll be happy to visit your restaurant with the family. With that, we parted ways. The aftermath of the wedding was left to Chris and Emily. The trouble they faced now was their own making. And I felt no sympathy. It seems the cost of the wedding venue is going to be close to $400,000. What? Really? But with that many guests, it makes sense. Plus, everyone left midway through, right? There are also cancellation fees for the meals. Oh no. But the $60,000. Don't worry about that. Who do you think I am? I secretly collected it back.
Way to go, Dad.
Chris and Emily ended up being responsible for the entire cost. Normally, some of it could be covered by the wedding gifts, but it seems most of the guests took their gifts back when they left. Even though Chris and Emily were elite employees, they didn't have enough money to cover all the expenses. Moreover, they were both fired because of this incident. With limited options, Chris decided to come to us. What are you doing here? You must have plenty of money, right? Give some to me. Chris and Emily came back home, looking ragged and worn out. There's no way we can do that. You're being too presumptuous. That's right. There's nothing here for you, not even a penny.
But I am the eldest son of this house, right? I should inherit it eventually.
Have you forgotten? When you left, I said you wouldn't inherit anything. Now you understand. Don't come back here ever again. We'll show you. You'll regret this one day. With those parting words, Chris and Emily left. The next day, Mr. Anderson, Emily's father, paid us a visit. I guessed they would come here too. Yes, they came asking for money. I've essentially disowned Emily. I see. He said essentially because, despite everything, she was still his only daughter. Mr. Anderson looked a bit sad as he said this. Afterward, the two of them seemed to be working non-stop to earn money. Given their high pride, it apparently wasn't going well. The thought of being free from them brings me real happiness. I have no plans to marry, especially after seeing what happened to my brother.
I'll continue helping with the farm and live life as I please.
Housewives are like parasites, aren't they? Terry looks down on me, a full-time homemaker, at a family gathering. The relatives around us are giving Terry puzzled looks. But, oblivious to the atmosphere, Mary loudly laughs and retorts. Oh wow, that sounds almost like being jobless or without any direction. Indeed, I don't have a job. But that's only because Terry wanted it that way. I grit my teeth in frustration. Enjoying my discomfort, Terry says with a sneer, "Why don't you just quit being a full-time homemaker and get a job? Though I doubt someone incompetent like you could manage." Hey, Dad. It's mean to say the truth like that. Mary laughs heartily, finding his words hilariously absurd. I've had enough of this husband and daughter.
Then I quit being a mother today. What?
After this, the two of them will face a desperate situation. My name is Millie Smith. I'm a 45-year-old full-time homemaker. I currently live with my husband, Terry, and his daughter, Mary. I met Terry at a dinner party hosted by an acquaintance. At that time, I was a nurse with no romantic prospects. Nursing is mostly women, and while there are more men in medicine, the competition is fierce. Usually, the beautiful senior nurses were the ones dating doctors. Someone with average looks like me didn't stand a chance. Plus, dating within the hospital seemed awkward if things didn't work out. So, I decided to seek relationships outside. Through an acquaintance, I was introduced to men. But it never went well. My job involved night shifts and working weekends. Maybe that's why I couldn't match schedules with most men. Because of that, my dating experiences always ended after just 1 or 2 dates. But Terry was different. Terry and I had many dates together. A big reason for this was his job. He worked in sales at a multinational cosmetics company. His work mostly involved dealings with department stores, and he worked regardless of weekends. As a result, Terry often had weekdays off, making it easier to match our schedules. Dating Terry was fun. Our dates were short, often just meals or karaoke, but they were always filled with laughter. I thought I'd be so happy if I could marry Terry. Then one day, out of the blue, he proposed to me. I was so happy I cried. Terry was concerned to see me crying, but when I said yes, he was overjoyed. After meeting my parents, all that was left was to make it official. That's when Terry told me he was divorced with a 10-year-old daughter, Mary. His ex-wife had suddenly left him. And it seems that led to a divorce eventually. He asked me to quit nursing and to be a full-time homemaker. As Mary was still in elementary school and needed care at home. I'm really sorry, but I love you, Millie, and I want to be with you, he said with a look of regret. Few women would agree to marry upon learning about a stepchild so late. That's probably why Terry waited so long to tell me. But I loved Terry, so I agreed with a smile. I really loved my job as a nurse and thought it was my calling, but there was no helping it. A new life with the man I loved. I was looking forward to our married life together. For 10 years, I supported Terry and Mary as a full-time homemaker. To outsiders, our family might seem ideal. A family of 3 living in a house with a yard. As the wife, I'm a full-time homemaker. Terry works at a multinational corporation, and we seem to have a comfortable life financially. But reality was different. After we got married, Terry stopped seeing me as a woman. I felt more like a housekeeper to him. One morning, just after we'd married, Terry sat at the dining table, silent and seemingly sleepy. "Good morning. Breakfast's ready," I said, setting the meal on the table. It was when I was placing scrambled eggs, salad, and bacon on a plate with toast. Suddenly, Terry said, "Hold on," stopping me in my tracks. "What's wrong?" I asked, surprised by his sudden interjection. He looked at me with a twisted face, accusingly.
"Why are you serving bacon for breakfast? What if Mary gains weight because of that?"
I was taken aback by his remark. If it were a little kid, I'd think that concern is necessary. But Mary is already in the 4th grade. She can surely eat bacon no problem. So, I countered.
"Eating bacon occasionally isn't a big deal. It's not like we're vegans."
But Terry wasn't convinced. Instead, he looked at me with disgust.
"You're just being careless because Mary isn't your biological child, aren't you? Don't slack off, even if you are just a housewife."
He was raising his voice when Mary walked in, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "Good morning." As soon as Terry saw her, his face lit up with a smile. "Good morning, Mary. You look cute today." Where did his earlier rudeness towards me go? I watched his quick change of attitude with a cold eye. The smile he no longer showed me, he now lavished entirely on Mary. Terry gently stroked Mary's face and talked to her. Mary, of course, was smiling all along. Then, after lavishing attention on Mary, Terry glared at me and said in a low voice,
"Anyway, for Mary's sake, make a chicken dish now. And make sure it's tender, good quality chicken. If you cut corners like this again, I won't forgive you."
Terry said that and then threw the bacon I had cooked into the trash can. I was terribly shaken by this sudden event.
"What are you doing? That's such a waste."
I protested, but Terry just glared at me. He even started yelling at me loudly.
"Don't talk back, just a housewife. You're eating off my money. Your only response should be yes."
Mary looked at me with cold eyes. I was scolded continuously until Terry was satisfied. I had no allies here. "Yes," I replied, biting back my frustration. Terry's behavior had made Mary increasingly brazen. She took it for granted to order me around, and threw tantrums if I didn't comply. Telling Terry would only make matters worse, so I couldn't speak firmly to Mary. Now, 10 years have passed since we started living together, and Mary is already 20. She's a college student now, but dumps all her personal chores on me. Today, she came back from college saying, "I'm home," and just left her coat and socks in the entrance, not bothering to pick them up. "Hey, can you please put your laundry in the basket?" I hurriedly picked up her scattered clothes, pleading desperately. Mary carelessly left her rain-soaked clothes lying around. "If I don't pick them up and wash them quickly, they'll start to smell. And the floor will get damp, which is the worst." But Mary just said lazily, "Ugh, why don't you just do it?
You're a housewife, that's your job, right? It's not like you have anything else to do, you're free anyway."
Saying this, she went to change into her house clothes, leaving more clothes strewn about. Mary then casually opened the fridge and started drinking a 1L carton of juice.
"This is really troublesome,"
I muttered to myself. Mary has no sense of femininity. Her actions are clumsy, and she leaves the empty carton as is, not even bothering to put it back in the fridge, even though there's still some left. As I stood there perplexed, Terry came home.
"I'm home," What's all this fuss about?
He looked puzzled. Mary ran to Terry with a smile. And then she uttered a devilish remark.
Dad. She's harassing me, she said, pointing at me. What?
Terry glared at me. I, exasperated by Mary's attitude, explained.
I just asked Mary to at least put her clothes in the laundry basket after she scattered them around.
I thought that was a simple enough task, something even a grade schooler could do. I shouldn't be asking for anything too difficult. But the moment I said that, Terry let out a heavy sigh.
You should be able to handle that much. You're pointless as a housewife if you can't even manage the household properly,
he said, blaming me one-sidedly. To Terry, I seemed incompetent because I couldn't provide 100% support for Mary's lifestyle. That's not fair, I whispered in shock. Why should I have to coddle Mary, a college student, like a toddler? I certainly didn't agree with that. Mary hid behind Terry, smirking triumphantly at me.
Just do everything yourself. From now on, be proactive and get things done before I even have to say anything,
Terry instructed me. After that, both of them returned to their respective rooms.
I'm exhausted.
Alone, I felt all my energy drain away. Lately, Mary has been imitating Terry's attitude towards me, always looking down on me. This doesn't help in feeling any affection for her. I always think I should raise her as if she were my own daughter, but with her acting this way, it's tough. It's hard even with a blood connection. Terry, who I thought loved me, doesn't show any affection towards me either. I'm always treated like a housekeeper. Since we got married, he only smiles at Mary. Am I really okay with this? I whispered to myself while picking up the clothes Mary had strewn around. Amidst this, Terry suddenly told me. This Saturday, we have a family gathering at my parents' house. Make sure you prepare everything. I was bewildered by his announcement.
Saturday? That's the day after tomorrow. Why are you telling me this now?
Today is Thursday. I need to buy gifts for the in-laws and rearrange the plans I had for Saturday.
If you had told me at least a week in advance,
I said, but Terry just looked down on me with a smirk. You're just a housewife, what important things could you possibly have? Unlike me and Mary, you don't have a job. Just hurry up and get ready. With that, he left for work.
You've got to be kidding me.
I panicked at his words. On the day of the family gathering. Excuse us. I managed to prepare the gifts and visited Terry's parents' house with him and Mary.
Welcome. We've been waiting for you.
Terry's mother greeted us with a smile. Terry's father had passed away, and now his mother lived alone in their house. She's a kind woman, always telling me, "Do you need any help? I'm here if you ever need to talk." I would have liked to talk to Terry's mother about Terry and Mary's behavior, but I didn't want to burden her with unnecessary worries. So, I kept it to myself. By the time we arrived, other relatives of Terry's had already gathered. Terry's mother had ordered sushi for everyone, and the family gathering proceeded pleasantly. However, about an hour in, as everyone's drinks flowed, Terry, slightly tipsy, laughed and exclaimed,
My wife, a full-time homemaker, doesn't want to work. She really costs a fortune.
He slammed his beer mug on the table.
Terry, what's gotten into you all of a sudden?
Terry's mother asked him, puzzled. The relatives looked at Terry in surprise.
Terry, have you had too much to drink? Here, have some water.
I offered him a cup of water. But he knocked it away forcefully. And he declared, Housewives are like parasites. Terry was looking down on me, a full-time homemaker, at the family gathering with obvious contempt. His eyes clearly held contempt for me. The relatives around us were giving him puzzled looks. But Mary, seemingly oblivious to the atmosphere, laughed loudly and said, Oh wow, that sounds almost like being jobless or without any direction. Indeed, I don't work. But that's because Terry wanted it that way. And to properly care for Mary when she was in elementary school. He's been disregarding the past 10 years. Frustrated, I gritted my teeth. Terry, amused by my reaction, mockingly said, "Why don't you just quit being a full-time homemaker and get a job? Though, I doubt someone incompetent like you could manage." This, coming from the man who told me to quit my job. It's unbelievable. I wanted to continue my nursing career. After making me quit my job, it's been 10 years and now he flips the script like this. And on top of that, he calls me incompetent. It's just too malicious. Apparently realizing Terry's remark was out of line, his mother said, "Terry, enough is enough. How can you say Millie is incompetent?" She scolded him, and the relatives looked at Terry disapprovingly. But Terry seemed unfazed, laughing off, "Why is Mom angry? I'm just being strict with her because she gets carried away if I'm too kind. Mary is no different."
Oh, come on, Dad. It's mean to tell the truth like that. I do think she's incompetent, though.
Mary burst into laughter, finding Terry's remark absurd. Terry's mother looked puzzled and upset at both Terry and Mary's behavior.
"That's terrible,"
she muttered quietly, and looked at me with concern. I softly told her, "Terry and Mary are always like this. Please don't worry about it." Then, my mother-in-law, turning pale, came over to apologize. I had intended to smooth things over, but it seems I only added fuel to the fire. She glared at Terry and Mary. But the two of them didn't seem to realize it at all. Terry and Mary showed no signs of remorse and continued to laugh uproariously. I've had enough of this husband and daughter. I gave Terry and Mary an ultimatum.
"Then I quit being a mother today."
"What?" The two looked at me, dumbfounded. This would lead them into a desperate situation. Mary, recovering first, burst out laughing.
"Hilarious. If you stop being a mom, what will be left for you?"
She laughed heartily. Terry, joining in Mary's mockery, looked down on me with a scornful laugh. "What are you gonna do quitting being a mom now?" Terry and Mary kept repeating terrible things to me. Their attitudes were unpleasant to watch. Terry's mother had been frowning and looking displeased since earlier. Her gaze towards her son and granddaughter was not one of affection. She probably despised their unreasonable behavior. The other relatives were also whispering and looking at Terry and Mary with discomfort. Nobody was laughing along with them. Oblivious to this, Terry and Mary continued to make condescending remarks about me.
"You've been unemployed for 10 years. Society doesn't need you anymore. That's the price for playing around at home all this time."
Terry sneered at me.
"Unlike me, who's young and has a future, you're just an old woman now."
"So sorry for you." Mary laughed mockingly. I felt humiliated. Silently, I clenched my fist. I've endured more than 10 years. I hoped to become a real family because I loved Terry and believed Mary and I could eventually bond as mother and daughter. I had believed so. But the reality was entirely different. Since we got married, Terry's attitude changed completely. He always treated me like a housekeeper, never even calling me by my name. Mary was the same. She was always commanding me, thinking of me as a convenient person to take care of her needs, never seeing me as a mother. I tried to treat Mary as my own child, pouring my love into her care. I never missed a school event and woke up early to make her favorite dishes for field trip lunches. Despite all this, Mary never thanked me once. Her usual response was, "You're just a housewife, isn't that normal? You should try harder, actually." Terry has never thanked me for anything either.
"Who do you think you owe for being able to eat? You should be kneeling and thanking me."
Terry always said that. In his eyes, those who work and earn money are superior, and it's just natural for me to do all the housework. He would often say, "You have it easy, staying at home all day." That's not a joke. From morning to night, I have so much to do: cleaning, laundry, cooking. Even when Terry and Mary were leisurely watching TV, I was always busy with household chores. To them, all my efforts were taken for granted. I was just a convenient existence for them. I don't want to live with these two anymore. It's time to move on. Amidst this bizarre atmosphere, I suddenly stood up. Terry and Mary were surprised to see me get up.
What's this all of a sudden? You are startling me.
Terry protested in a high-pitched voice. With a blank expression, I made my declaration right there.
Then I'm quitting being a mother, so from now on, I'm a stranger to Terry and Mary. Goodbye.
I swiftly picked up my bag and headed out of my in-laws' house. The in-laws and relatives seemed confused, but no one tried to stop me. Terry started to panic.
Wait! Are you going home? Yes, that's right. It's rude to leave a dinner party early, isn't it? And yet you're trying to go home first.
Mary looked at me in disbelief. What are these two even talking about?
Huh? There's no way I'm going back to the house where I lived with you. I'm going to my parents' house.
I replied, half in disbelief. I no longer want to live with these two. Terry then shouted in disbelief.
What are you thinking? Going to your parents' house all of a sudden? What about the housework? Aren't you a full-time homemaker?
Mary glared at me.
Exactly. That's so unreasonable. What about my meals and taking care of me? You have to do it properly, or I'll be in trouble.
Mary demanded, as if attacking me. Even now, they're only thinking of themselves. It's just unbelievable. I sighed lightly and replied.
Why don't you take care of it yourselves? Anyway, I'm parasites, I'm leaving, bye-bye.
I waved my hand and left the place. Terry and Mary were shouting something behind me, but I ignored them. I won't be manipulated by them anymore. Let them regret it for the rest of their lives. Then, I quickly went back to the house we lived in and gathered only my valuables. I had said I wouldn't return, but I still had my clothes there. I only went back to pick up the essentials. I had to hurry before Terry and Mary returned. My belongings were few, just some clothes, so I quickly packed them into a duffel bag. Terry hardly ever spent money on me, so my personal items were limited. I left the house key in the mailbox. I won't be needing it anymore. Meanwhile, I kept receiving calls and numerous messages from Terry like, "You'll regret it when you come back," and "Come back to my parents' house right now." As if I would return to my in-laws' place. I had no intention of going back home either. After all, there was nothing to lose from divorcing Terry. I went straight to my parents' house. I had informed them beforehand, so my mother warmly welcomed me. My father also looked concerned. My real family is just these two people. I almost cried at my parents' kindness. So, I started my life at my parents' home. Life there was more comfortable than I thought. There were no Terry and Mary to command me around. No one criticized my cooking, and I didn't have to pick up after their messes. I could use my free time for job hunting and focusing on myself. I applied to several promising job openings. Being single now, I could even do night shifts. Shortly after, I received an interview invitation. I had been continuously ignoring calls and messages from Terry and Mary. By now, their house must be in chaos. And that's probably why they're contacting me. I won't help them now, not after everything. I firmly decided this and continued to ignore the incoming calls that kept coming. After 3 weeks, with my background as a nurse, I managed to secure a new job. It's a full-time position as a regular employee. There's some anxiety about coping with a 10-year gap. But I have no choice but to push through. I bolstered myself for the challenge. The night before my first day at the new job, my mother came to my room with a confused look. "What's wrong?" I asked. She hesitantly said, "Terry and Mary have come over. I can't just send them away, what should I do?" She was clearly troubled. I hadn't divorced Terry yet, so she was unsure how to deal with my legal husband. My father, concerned for me, offered, should I go and give them a piece of my mind? I didn't want to burden my parents any further. So I reluctantly answered.
I'll go.
It was time to sever ties with Terry and Mary. I headed to the front door. Opening it, I found Terry and Mary outside the gate.
What do you want now?
I asked coldly. I had no intention of letting them into my parents' house. Even when Terry said, "Let us in, it's cold out here," I didn't open the gate. Instead, I added, "If you have something to say, say it here. Make it quick, please." Terry seemed a bit surprised by my non-compliant attitude. Then, he sighed heavily.
How long do you plan to take it easy at your parents' house? We're in a mess back home.
Terry started with insults as soon as he opened his mouth. He was clearly angry. He must think it's all my fault, not reflecting on his behavior. Mary also glared at me.
Yeah. It's all your fault. The house is a mess, and we have no clean clothes to wear. Hurry up and come back to take care of it.
They told me it had been 3 weeks since I left. Terry and Mary apparently haven't been taking care of the house at all. Mary just leaves her clothes scattered everywhere. And hasn't even used the washing machine. Terry doesn't reprimand her. Instead, he seems to be contributing to the mess. As a result, the living room is filled with dirty clothes. Unbelievable. 2 adults and they let the house get into such a state. I muttered in disbelief. However, Terry reacted to my murmurs.
Laundry is your job, so I'm leaving it for you. Be grateful and wash it, will you?
Exactly. Hurry up and do it. That's all you're good for, isn't it? Mary added, laughing. I was appalled and speechless. How long do these 2 think they can order me around? But if I keep quiet, it's playing right into their hands. I won't allow that. I calmly countered.
Why would I do that? I'm divorcing Terry. A lawyer will contact you soon, so please make sure you handle the procedures properly.
I spoke calmly. I determined not to be swayed by Terry and Mary anymore. But Terry seemed unsatisfied. How can you divorce without any income?
Someone incompetent like you will be in trouble very soon,
he said, laughing loudly. Mary, still seemingly confident, told me.
Being a real jobless person is bad, you know? Apologize to Dad quickly and come back home.
We'll put you to work again. I didn't want to be at their mercy anymore. Besides, I have a job now. I smiled and rejected them.
I've already secured a new job, so don't worry about me. Maybe you should worry about living in a garbage house? What? You already got a job? That's too quick.
Terry sounded frustrated. Mary felt the same.
I thought you'd be crying by now without a job. But look at you, acting all high and mighty.
Mary clicked her tongue in frustration. Expecting my misery, they really are the worst kind of father and child. As I was thinking this, Mary, as if she had an idea, said, You're my mother, right? So you can't just quit being a mother so easily. I'm still a student. She made a face as if she were the victim. But it's too late for that. Besides, Mary must know the truth. I smiled at Mary and spoke. You know, don't you, Mary? That we're not related by blood. Once I divorce Terry, we'll no longer be family. Mary turned pale. As if she just realized it. Her mind seems quite naive. I'm not Mary's real mother. Her biological mother is someone else. That's why, after the divorce from Terry, Mary and I will be strangers. If Mary had shown me some affection, maybe I would have felt some motherly love for her. But to Mary, I was just a convenient housekeeper until the end. She always commanded me around, acting as if it was only natural for me to serve her. I don't want to be a mother in such a situation. Mary looked frustrated, but she couldn't think of any way out. She glared at me in silence. Terry seemed to realize my determination. And now that I had found a new job, there was no way to avoid the divorce. He looked at me resentfully. With nothing left to say, I bid them my final farewell.
Goodbye.
We'll never meet again. Terry and Mary's faces contorted. They had planned to bring me back to do the housework, but their plan had failed. And with the divorce, they would have to accept that I would never do the housework for them again. They would have to return to their unkempt house alone. They must be filled with a sense of despair. Ignoring them, I closed the front door of my parents' house. Eventually, Terry and I got divorced. He was quite resistant at first, only saying, "We won't divorce. Everything will be back to normal once Millie returns home. Going back to being a housekeeper is out of the question." Through my lawyer, I conveyed that reconstruction was impossible and that if Terry continued to refuse the divorce, it would lead to a legal battle. Terry would surely be troubled by the idea of going to court. Eventually, he signed the divorce papers. As for what happened afterward, Terry quit his job. It turns out he is completely incapable of handling household chores. Not even doing laundry. He ended up wearing dirty clothes repeatedly. Naturally, this caused a stench at his workplace, and he was repeatedly warned by his superiors. Terry, having an oddly high pride, strongly resisted these warnings. And eventually resigned. However, even after quitting, he couldn't find a new job. Going to interviews without being able to take care of himself and smelling bad certainly didn't help. Mary could have done the laundry, even if Terry found it difficult. Both had become accustomed to doing nothing. There are coin laundries and housekeepers available, but they chose not to utilize these services. It's their responsibility. There's still a mortgage on the house and Mary's college fees to consider. If things continue like this, they're headed for a downfall. Once, Mary called me. I was reluctant to answer, but I did anyway. Yes? Mary immediately started talking.
Finally, you answered. The house is a mess, full of dirty, smelly clothes. Plus, Dad has no income since he quit his job.
I was disgusted that she was still trying to rely on someone else in this situation. I'm a stranger to you now.
Maybe ask your grandmother?
I suggested, sighing. But Mary, almost in tears, said, Grandma has been distant since you left, and other relatives don't answer our calls. Please, help us. My mother-in-law is a sensible person and was a homemaker herself. Moreover, many among our relatives are also homemakers. It's no surprise they distanced themselves from people who belittled homemakers. It's only natural to distance oneself from people who belittle homemakers. Don't call me again. Goodbye, I said and hung up the phone. I immediately blocked Mary's number. From now on, Terry and Mary will likely face increasing hardship. Without income, they won't be able to afford Mary's college fees. She'll probably have to drop out soon. But that's their fault for not doing any household work. Unaware of this, Terry and Mary will likely continue to struggle for the rest of their lives. It's been 3 years since then. My life has changed significantly. I've remarried. 6 months ago, I married a colleague from the same hospital. I never thought workplace romance was possible, but he was very proactive in his approach. And eventually, I gave in. He works as a nurse in a different ward. He is a dedicated and serious person. He had been single all his life and can do all the household chores. He even cooks better than I do, which is surprising. He always treats me as an individual. Asking things like, Millie, how about fish for dinner tonight, while checking the fridge. Terry never did anything and always complained about the food I cooked. He only saw me as a housekeeper. So, my husband's kindness means a lot to me. Nursing is tough, but we support each other and manage somehow. There might be many challenges ahead. But I believe we can overcome them together. Keep going. I'm determined.
This month's water bill is $1,400?
I exclaimed, looking at the water bill in disbelief. The amount was nearly doubled from last month. We'd moved into this house just a few months ago. We were supposed to be starting a happy new life together with my husband and our young son, but then this unexpected situation arose. I have always been mindful of saving money, considering our house mortgage and the future of our son, who just started elementary school this year. I couldn't believe our water bill increased by $700 in just 1 month, given that we lived as usual. "What's wrong?" my husband asked, seeing my pale face. I explained the situation to him. He too was surprised, leaving both of us bewildered. "This amount's ridiculous. Maybe there's a leak somewhere." I couldn't recall leaving the water running, whether doing dishes, laundry, or bathing. With Oliver at school during the day, it seemed unlikely he'd left a tap open. It seemed impossible that it was due to forgetting to turn off the taps or excessive use. It had to be a problem with the plumbing. "Yeah, let's check it out." Along with my husband, who nodded in agreement, I hurriedly searched all over the house to find the cause. Then, I found something that left me speechless. Seeing my reaction, my husband, who had rushed over, also lowered his gaze and fell silent. Unable to look away, I muttered to myself, "Why is this here?" "My name is Ava. I'm a 35-year-old work-from-home creator since I got married. I live with my husband John and our 6-year-old son Oliver. I met John, who is 2 years older than me, at a company where we both used to work. He was a colleague back then. After years of dating, we married when I was 27, and now have our beloved son. Now, we have our lovely son and lead a happy life. Recently, using the savings we've accumulated together, we fulfilled our dream of building our own house in a small countryside town. Both of us were raised in the city, so moving to a place rich in nature was a dream come true. Our new house has a large backyard, and I'm planning to create a flower bed once we settle in. For now, the yard is quite plain, but we plan to plant flowers and set up play equipment for our son, Oliver, to enjoy. John and I are currently discussing our future, hoping to make this house an even better environment for our son. After moving here, John left his job and is now working hard as a remote programmer to support our family. Together with my husband, I'm dedicated to working hard while also watching our beloved son grow. This was Oliver's year to start elementary school, so we timed our move to this town in summer to coincide with that. By September, he was thrilled to have made many friends. It's so heartwarming as parents to hear him happily talk about his school life and see him having fulfilling days. Oliver has always loved living creatures, and he seems to really like this town where he can interact with nature a lot. About a month after we started our new life here, I was working from home one afternoon when the doorbell rang. When I checked the monitor, I recognized the middle-aged man standing at the front door. It was Daniel, the man who lives in the house right next to ours, so I quickly headed to the door. Our neighbor, living alone in an old wooden house, had shared with us during our moving greeting that his parents had passed away and he was divorced, leaving him to live by himself.
"Hey there, good afternoon. I brought this for you to enjoy,"
Daniel said with a smile, holding out a styrofoam box as I opened the door. "Caught these fish today. I figured, coming from the city, you might not have had much fresh fish. The taste is completely different from what you get at the supermarket," he explained. I was at a loss for words, managing only a polite smile. Since our initial greeting, Daniel and I had only exchanged nods when we saw each other outside. John and I don't really know Daniel well since we haven't interacted much. So when he suddenly showed up with food, I was unsure how to react. Seeing that I hesitated to accept it immediately, Daniel momentarily frowned in displeasure, but quickly smiled again. "No need to be shy. We're neighbors, after all. Let's help each other out," he said, insistently handing me the box. I had no choice but to accept it. Taking the box, I peeked inside and indeed, there were several fresh fish. "Thank you, I'll bring something over later as thanks," I replied modestly, and Daniel seemed satisfied as he left. Back when we lived in the city, we never had neighbors share food with us. While we had some interaction with neighbors at my parents' home, living alone in an apartment often meant not knowing who lived next door. We'd nod when passing by or make small talk in the elevator. But that was it. I knew that in the countryside, residents tended to have closer relationships. But we also heard it could lead to troubles. So, John and I decided to maintain a friendly but distant relationship with our neighbors. Indeed, I received a whole fish and was at a loss about what to do with it. At the supermarket, I usually bought fish that were already scaled and gutted, often opting for fillets. It was quite a task to research and learn how to prepare a whole fish, from scaling to gutting, using cookbooks and online resources. Still, I took it positively, thinking I should learn to handle fish. Feeling obliged to return the favor, I brought over some fruit I bought at the supermarket the next day. Daniel was humble in his response, saying, "Sorry for the trouble," so my impression of him wasn't too bad. But contrary to my expectation that this would be a one-time event, a few days later, Daniel brought over more fish. Honestly, I thought, again? Unaware of my internal struggle, Daniel said, "I caught these this morning, please take them." It's only natural to share with neighbors, emphasizing the phrase, "we're neighbors, after all." When I hesitated, he asked if I liked the last fish, to which I could only nod. They were indeed tasty. "Then please, take them." He said this and almost forced the fish upon me before leaving. I understood he was sharing out of kindness, and I didn't want to disregard his goodwill. So I decided to thank him with a sweet treat the next day, albeit reluctantly. That night, when I discussed Daniel's actions with John, he replied with a troubled expression, "Indeed, the fish were tasty, but him coming over frequently is a bit too much." John started to show discomfort with our neighbor's attitude. But he couldn't possibly know our real feelings. The next week, and the week after, Daniel continued to bring fish every weekend. Even when I gently declined, saying we had enough, he'd insist, "Oh, come on," and leave the fish. It reached a point where I didn't even want to see him, sometimes pretending not to be home, only to find the fish left at the door. John and I talked about firmly refusing next time, as I was honestly getting tired of having to constantly thank him. As expected, Daniel showed up again. I was busy with work, and the doorbell broke my concentration. As much as I feel bad saying this, it was becoming more of an inconvenience than a kind gesture. When Daniel again offered fish with his usual "we're neighbors, after all," I shook my head and refused. "I'm sorry, but we really don't need any more fish. I've told you several times now. Please, give it to another neighbor." Even when I firmly refused, he just stood there, looking stunned. "Oh, don't be like that. I give to other neighbors too. Here, take it." I hadn't expected him to persist after a clear refusal. Watching him smilingly offer the box of fish, I anticipated a long conversation. Interrupted in my work and slightly irritated, I said with an inner sigh, "No, really, we don't need any more. I'm sorry, but I'm in the middle of work. I must go now." For the first time, Daniel sounded surprised as he uttered, "Huh?" But I simply nodded and closed the door. Immediately after I locked the door, I heard him trying the handle multiple times. Then the doorbell started ringing repeatedly.
"Hey, open up. I went to the trouble of bringing this, and you won't accept it? Who do you think you are?"
I heard angry shouts coming from outside. Scared, I even put a chain on the front door, and that's when John came out from his office, alarmed by the commotion. "What's all this noise about?" "John, it's Daniel." I began explaining the situation to him, and he quickly pressed the intercom response button. "Enough already," he said sternly to Daniel. "We appreciate your kindness, but that's enough. No matter how much you talk about neighborly relations, bringing things over repeatedly after being refused is just imposing. Please, don't bring any more fish." John continued, and through the monitor, we saw Daniel biting his lip in frustration. "You ungrateful people, after all the neighborly kindness I've shown." With a loud bang on the front door, Daniel left, muttering those words. After that, he stopped bringing fish. I was worried we might have offended him with our last interaction, but when we saw him outside, our relationship remained the same, albeit a bit awkward, with just a nod of acknowledgement. Then, months passed by peacefully, and 5 months had gone by since we moved in. One evening after finishing work, I checked the water bill and was stunned by the amount. It was nearly $700 higher than last month. What's this? I had never seen such an outrageous amount before. In our area, the water meter is read monthly, and bills are sent accordingly. Comparing it to last month's bill, the amount was almost 10 times higher, making me wonder if it was a clerical error. I've always been mindful of saving for our house loan and our child's future, so it was unimaginable that we used so much water. In fact, it seemed impossible for the bill to jump by $700 just like that.
Ava, what's wrong? You look pale. Are you okay?
John asked, noticing my distress. Showing him the bill, he too was shocked. What's this? Why is the water bill so high? Something must be wrong. Maybe there's a leak somewhere. That was the only possible cause we could think of. John agreed, that might be it. Let's check around. So, we started searching the entire house for the cause. We checked everywhere, both inside and the backyard tap, but couldn't find any signs of a water leak. Growing more puzzled by the minute, we were both thoroughly confused. Mom, Dad? Baffled, we were contemplating whether to contact the water company when Oliver, who had been watching us rush around, spoke up. What is it, Oliver? He seemed hesitant, as if he had something to say. Well, you see. We were stunned by the words that came out of Oliver's mouth. It was so shocking that it was hard to believe at first, but I don't want to doubt my son's story. We wanted to check on what Oliver just told us right away, but we had a family trip planned starting the day after tomorrow. It was Christmas vacation, and both John and I had adjusted our work schedules to take a week off. So, keeping Oliver's words in mind, we decided to shut off all the water in the house while we were away and see what happens. We went out of state for our trip and had a wonderful time for a week. We visited various places, but the highlight for Oliver was a famous aquarium. His eyes sparkled as he looked at the fish and other creatures, and he seemed reluctant to leave, even as closing time approached. I don't want to leave, he said, and John and I comforted him, promising to return next year. Seeing his happy face made me determined to work hard once we got back. After a week, we returned home, still in high spirits from the trip. But just as we were about to open our front door, we heard a loud male voice behind us. Hey, wait a minute. John and I turned around in surprise to see Daniel, pale and stumbling towards us. He clutched an old bucket in his hand. As he nearly tripped once, some water splashed out of the bucket.
What have you guys done?
He exclaimed, flustered. Realizing the situation, I thought to myself, I knew it. Why were you gone for a whole week? And you turned off the water before leaving, didn't you? We went on a family vacation because Oliver is on school break. But how do you know we turned off the water? You can't see that from outside. I asked him, although I had a pretty good idea why he was so frantic. That's... Daniel faltered, and I took out my smartphone from my bag. Flicking through the screen, I showed him the footage.
What? What's this video?
He exclaimed, staring wide-eyed and angry at the phone. The screen displayed footage from our home security camera. We always had a camera at our front door, but we installed an additional one in the backyard the day before we left for our trip. The footage from our vacation period showed Daniel boldly entering our backyard. He was carrying a long hose and connecting it to our outdoor tap. He stamped his foot in irritation when he realized no water was coming out. I checked the camera footage every day during our trip. You were frequently visiting our backyard, not just this past week, but even before that. I told him. Daniel looked frantically between the phone screen and me. Why would you do that? Oliver then piped up, I saw you in our backyard, mister. What? Daniel started to sweat profusely, realizing he had been caught. Actually, a week ago, on the day the water bill arrived, Oliver revealed to us that Daniel had been secretly coming to our backyard to draw water. On the day we received the water bill, Oliver had been playing at a friend's house nearby. When he returned home that afternoon, he witnessed Daniel hastily leaving our backyard. At the time, Daniel had a long hose in his hand. John and I were home but busy working in separate rooms, not noticing anything unusual. Furthermore, our respective workrooms are located away from the backyard. I suspect that Daniel had been observing our daily routines for some time. Knowing that we both stay in our rooms working during the day, he boldly trespassed onto our property. Considering the water bill increased by $700, it's possible that he might have also been coming late at night while we were asleep. Since the other neighbors' houses are a bit distant, it's likely they didn't notice Daniel doing anything in our backyard. John asked, "We heard from the neighbors that you like fish and even breed and sell them. Were you stealing water from our house for your fish tanks?" Apparently, the neighbors mentioned that Daniel often caught fish from nearby waters to cook or keep. One neighbor who had visited his house said he had a lot of Japanese rice fish in tanks. He would buy and breed them, then give or sell them to acquaintances. However, he complained about having too many fish and not enough space for all the tanks. So Daniel stole water from our house because he couldn't afford the cost of maintaining them? Our suspicions were confirmed as Daniel, resigned, began scratching his head.
"I had no choice. I'm broke and they require clean water, so I had to frequently change the water in my fish tanks. A little water shouldn't be a big deal."
I wanted to argue that it wasn't just a little water, but he kept on talking, leaving no room for me to interject. It was summer, so he had been changing the water in his numerous tanks daily. Apparently, tap water can't be used directly for fish tanks and needs to be treated to remove chlorine. Changing the water involved not only refilling but also cleaning the tanks, requiring a significant amount of water. He confessed that he was using both his home's and our water supply for taking care of his Japanese rice fish, and the $700 increase in our water bill was just a fraction of his total usage. Moreover, Daniel lived alone in an old house with no family. He had almost no savings and barely making ends meet, and panicked when our water supply was cut off.
"You guys got some fish from me before, so I should be allowed to take a little water. We're neighbors, it's only natural to help each other out, right?" His claim was so absurd that I was taken aback.
"What are you talking about? That's not how it works," I retorted. But Daniel showed no signs of acknowledging his wrongdoing. "Just turn the water back on. If these fish die because of you, it won't be the end of it," he shouted defiantly, raising the bucket in his hand. After Daniel lowered his hand, Oliver, curious, peered into the bucket and tilted his head in confusion. Wondering what caught his attention, I looked into the bucket too. It was filled with many swimming Japanese rice fish. They seemed to be swimming around energetically, which was somewhat relieving, but Oliver looked closely at the fish and then up at Daniel. "Hey mister, these aren't Japanese rice fish." "What?" Daniel was taken aback when my son pointed out his mistake. I was equally surprised and exclaimed, "What?
"What do you mean? They look like Japanese rice fish."
"They're not. Look at this." Oliver confidently pulled out a thick book from his bag and started flipping through the pages. It was a fish encyclopedia. Being a fish enthusiast, Oliver always carried various animal encyclopedias with him, and this time he had brought a fish encyclopedia for our aquarium visit. In fact, Oliver is such a fish enthusiast that he can usually identify most creatures at an aquarium. If Oliver said the fish in the bucket weren't Japanese rice fish, he was probably right. "These are mosquito fish." He pointed to a page in the encyclopedia. The page showed a photo of a small fish resembling Japanese rice fish. "Mosquito fish aren't allowed to be kept or sold," he continued. John and I also looked into the book. The page he showed us in the encyclopedia had a photo of Japanese rice fish for comparison, pointing out the slight differences in the tail fin shape. Observing the fish in the bucket, it was clear their tails matched the mosquito fish in the book. The book stated that mosquito fish are a highly reproductive invasive species, and it's illegal to breed, sell, or even keep them. "What you were doing is a clear violation of the law." I confronted Daniel, who started trembling.
No, I didn't know. I thought they were Japanese rice fish.
Uncle, rice fish and mosquito fish have different ways of giving birth. Rice fish lay eggs, but mosquito fish give birth to live fry. Didn't you know the difference, even though you like fish? Oliver, with an unusual calmness for a child, said. Chastened, Daniel couldn't respond and just groaned, unable to find words.
There are things that can't be excused by ignorance. You've been stealing water, and I'm going to report this to the police. Wait, what? Hold on a minute.
His face fell as I called the police without paying attention to his frantic pleas. He hung his head, sighing, oh no. He realized there was no way to talk his way out of this situation.
Good job noticing that, Oliver. You're amazing.
John praised, patting our son on the head, who smiled proudly. I am so grateful to my child for helping us uncover the cause of the massive water bill and the illegal activities of our neighbor. We hired a lawyer and claimed compensation for the unauthorized use of water and the additional charges we incurred. Furthermore, Daniel faced legal action for breeding and distributing an invasive species. If he had just bred them at home, there might have been an excuse, but he sold these fish as Japanese rice fish to others. That's clearly illegal. It turned out Daniel had sold these fish multiple times, mistaking them for Japanese rice fish. Despite the dubious buyers, our ties with Daniel were severed. However, he couldn't pay the fines because of his strained finances. Neighbors he had shared fish with in the past refused to help. As apparently, he had often forced fish on people and demanded favors in return. Naturally, everyone was eager to cut ties with him. In the end, Daniel had to sell his old house, which didn't fetch much money. Daniel apparently used up most of his money paying fines and compensating us, eventually losing his house. With the little money he had left, he moved to a more affordable area. The neighbor who always said, "We're neighbors, after all," was gone, and I finally felt free from the stress of this neighborly relationship. I worried he might seek revenge, but it seemed he had no energy left for that. Rumor has it that he's struggling to connect with people in his new community. Soon after, I became pregnant with our second child. We don't know the gender yet, but Oliver is excitedly waiting for a sibling. Oliver seems eager to share his knowledge about living creatures with his soon-to-be younger sibling, whether it's a brother or sister. John and I are determined to work even harder, anticipating the arrival of a new life in our family.
I am looking forward to welcoming this new member with my dear husband and son.
I'm taking the whole team and going independent, Tom announced proudly as I returned from work. The news was so sudden, I couldn't quite grasp it. What? As I stood there, dumbfounded, not knowing what to say, Tom, grinning, pulled out something. Also, this. Write it up and hand it in for me. That's. What he laid before me was a completed divorce form. See ya. Wait. My attempts to stop him were futile, and Tom left. Left alone in the house, I still couldn't fully comprehend the situation and just stood there. But then, suddenly, I thought of some people. Maybe they could help. I quickly grabbed my phone and called them. My name is Rachel Maxwell. I'm 27 and single. I work as an office clerk at a small IT company. Tired of the monotony, yet finding some comfort in it, I never took action to change anything. Like anyone else, I had my fair share of frustrations with work and relationships, often turning them into conversation topics with my colleagues and bosses. But there was one problem I needed to address. I couldn't find a boyfriend. While friends and colleagues got married, my life had not even a hint of romance. Whenever I thought a friend was calling after a long time, it was usually to announce their marriage. Anxious about my lack of romantic encounters, I couldn't genuinely congratulate them. But even when I thought about taking action, I couldn't bring myself to do it. Well, I thought it'd happen naturally someday. That changed when my closest colleague at work told me she had found a boyfriend. I decided to take serious action and started with a dating app. I installed a well-reviewed app, set up my profile and photos, and began interacting with men. But nothing worked out, and I felt defeated. After a few unsuccessful attempts at matchmaking parties, where either no matches happened or they didn't last. I thought if the next one didn't work out, I'd take a break from seeking romance. However, at the next party, I met Tom, who would become my husband. Tom seemed like a kind man at first sight. His voice and expressions were all so gentle, and he was a great conversationalist. "What do you do for work, Rachel?" "I'm in administration."
Really? That's impressive. I'm terrible with detailed tasks. I could never do office work.
It was the first time someone praised my job, and it made me somewhat happy. I tried to learn more about Tom and expand the conversation, but I quickly got swept up in his talkative charm. Tom continued to shower me with compliments. I wondered if he was just trying to impress me since we just met, but even if that was the case, being praised didn't feel bad. I'm so easily flattered. I found myself becoming more interested in Tom, wanting to talk more, and maybe even more than that. I had come to think so. It seemed Tom felt the same way, and we matched perfectly. After the matchmaking event, we decided to go out for drinks together. "It's so nice to be able to talk with you like this, Rachel." "Me too." With a little alcohol, the mood between us became even better. The idea of this being a one-time thing was no longer an option. "When should we go out next?" "Let me check my schedule." We naturally made plans for next time and parted ways for the day. After meeting a few more times, Tom asked me out. There was no reason to say no, and I happily accepted. 2 years of dating later, Tom proposed. I was truly happy, thinking I was finally getting married. I accepted the proposal, and we became husband and wife. The thought of a future with the man I loved, Tom, filled me with excitement. But later, I would come to regret accepting Tom's proposal. The hectic time of meeting each other's families and our wedding came to an end. Tom's parents were as kind and reliable as he was.
"Your parents live that far away? If something happens, you can't rely on them quickly."
"Yes, that's true." When I mentioned my parents lived far away, they said, "If you ever have trouble, come to us. We'll help however we can, and just let us know." I was used to my parents being far, but it wasn't without its worries. I was happy to hear the supportive words from my in-laws. Kind and dependable in-laws, and my beloved Tom. I felt surrounded by wonderful people. A few weeks into our marriage, life with Tom was as happy as I had imagined. Having quit my job to get married, I spent weekdays doing housework and waiting for Tom to come home. On weekends, we'd go out or just relax at home watching TV.
"Hey, I'm off tomorrow. Wanna go somewhere?" "Oh, yes, let's go to the shopping mall." "Great idea. And maybe we can stop by the bookstore nearby."
Planning our future outings with Tom was always fun. We didn't have children. Before getting married, we had discussed whether or not to have kids several times and ultimately decided against it. There were various concerns about having children, like my age, physical energy, and financial issues, but the main reason we chose not to was that we wanted to enjoy our lives just the two of us. Seeing happy families with children at places like shopping malls or children's photos on my friends' social media did make me envious at times. However, I believed that nothing could be happier than continuing our current life with Tom, and my fundamental view never changed. Then one day, something Tom said changed my life significantly. "I've been thinking about starting my own business." I wasn't too surprised, though. He had mentioned it before we got married. "I've been thinking about starting my own business in the future." "Wait, start your own business?" Of course, I was surprised when I first heard about his entrepreneurial aspirations. I wondered if it was really a good idea. Starting a business meant he would eventually leave his job. Would we be okay in the future? Would it work out? What if it failed? All these questions and worries filled my head. "Are you sure that's a good idea?" "Yeah, I've been thinking about it for a while." I shared all my concerns with Tom. He seemed confident, talking about his business plan, goals, and future aspirations. He even showed me some documents he had prepared, and I could see his seriousness. I thought if he's this prepared, he'll probably succeed. And even if it didn't work out, I believed Tom would handle it well. I decided to support Tom's dream.
What do you think about starting now? We've saved up a good amount. You know, it's better to start young. Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
With that, Tom began preparing for his startup. I decided to use the time I had previously spent on hobbies and rest to help with the business. It was all for Tom. His parents knew about his desire to start a business and came over to our house to help out. When he first said he wanted to start a business, you must have been surprised, right? He just dropped it on you out of nowhere? I was surprised. But he explained his goals and everything, so I thought it might be okay.
Thank you for trusting our son,
his mother said with a gentle smile. Spending more time with Tom's parents, I got to hear stories about him that I never knew in tales from their past. It turns out they used to run a business. It wasn't a large company, just a small one with a few employees, run by the two of them. Eventually, they had to close down due to financial troubles, but it was their story that sparked Tom's interest in entrepreneurship.
We told him to give it up, but he wouldn't listen. We said, if you can take responsibility, then go ahead and try it.
I had no idea about that. I hadn't known about this background, but it seemed like a very Tom-like reason to be interested in starting his own business. 2 months later, with all the preparations and applications complete, the business was up and running. It was an SNS consulting firm. As I didn't understand much about this world, I left the main operations to Tom. Instead, I took on all the administrative work. Tom's parents were probably curious about their son's business. They came over every few days to check on us and help out. Many people might find it unbelievable to see in-laws so often, but I was actually happy to spend time with them. They had become a significant support for me. 6 months into the business, things started to stabilize, and we even hired some part-time employees. I felt sorry about Tom's parents helping so much and offered to pay them, but they said, "We're just killing time. Don't worry about it." I felt bad, but I didn't want to make them uncomfortable with frequent talk about money, so I dropped the subject. Before I knew it, a year had passed since we started the business. The performance was still going strong, and we expanded our team with more employees and part-timers. Everyone we hired was kind, and I was happy to work in such a pleasant environment. I found myself enjoying work more than in my previous job. Everything seemed to be going well, but there was one thing that had changed for the worse. It was Tom's behavior. "Wait, you're taking the day off from work again?" "Yeah, sorry. I've got some stuff to handle." "Yeah, okay." Tom started missing work, saying he was sick or had errands. It's understandable to be sick occasionally, and errands can coincide with work once or twice, but when it happens frequently, it makes me wonder why he can't manage his schedule better. What could be so important that he needs to skip work? He always handles work-related tasks during work hours. The more I think about it, the more I wonder what Tom is secretly up to. "Rachel, I might be late or unable to come to work tomorrow because of some errands." "Sorry about that." "Again tomorrow?" Although he apologizes, it feels like just lip service. If he truly felt sorry, I believe he could make some changes in his behavior. One day, I decided to gently bring up Tom's excessive absences. Tom. I know it's your company, but it is still a job. I'd really appreciate it if you could handle personal errands on your days off." Tom seemed surprised by my words. "I'm sorry, I'll be more careful." "Thanks." After my talk, Tom began coming to work regularly again. It felt good to see him listening to my concerns, given his recent behavior. However, within a month, Tom was back to missing work, claiming to be sick or having errands. I doubted my single reminder would make a lasting impact. So I decided to talk to his parents. I need to talk about Tom." When work slowed down a bit, I approached his parents, who were helping us out. Their surprise was evident. "Tom's been doing that?" I thought he might be out working. I had no idea he was skipping work. Exactly, even though it's his job. Being sick is one thing, and personal errands are understandable, but it seems like he's taking off a bit too much. I know. As I explained Tom's recent behavior, they became visibly angry. The next day, his parents confronted Tom. "Tom, we heard you've been missing work? How did you know that?" "Rachel talked to us." "What are you doing, exactly?" "Remember, this is the business you started. Don't rely too much on others and take responsibility. We don't want you to end up like us, regretting it when it's too late." Tom seemed shocked and distant when his parents called him out. "Are you listening?" "Yeah, sorry, I'm listening. Just stop causing trouble for others. If you have a serious reason for being absent, you need to explain it in detail." "Got it?" "Got it." Tom reluctantly agreed to his father-in-law's words, seeming annoyed. I had never seen Tom like this before. As I stood there, puzzled, looking at Tom, he asked me, sounding irritated, "What?" "Sorry, it's nothing." "All right." With that, Tom left the room. His parents, too, seemed to have never seen Tom behave this way, whispering to each other. Could he be tired? Recently, on days when Tom said he had errands and skipped work, he would always come home late at night. I was curious about what these errands were, but every time I tried to ask, he would evade the question. What is he hiding from me? That night, I felt bad about bringing it up but decided to ask Tom directly. "Hey, what's been going on lately? Every time you say you have errands and skip work, you come home late. Are you hiding something from me?" "We're married, you don't have to hide things." I hoped he would open up, especially after what happened earlier in the day. But Tom just glared at me and said, "Rachel, it's none of your business. I don't need to tell you. But it's nothing to do with you if I say it's nothing to do with you. This conversation is over, got it?" "Wait a minute."
"Just leave it. I'll make sure not to skip work anymore, okay? You're being too persistent."
With that, he walked away from me. Persistent, huh? His words stung. It was the first time Tom had ever spoken to me so harshly. While I was in shock and felt that I could have looked at the situation a little longer, I also felt that it was his job and I wanted to make sure he was doing well. But now, if I bring it up again, he'll probably just call me persistent. I was at a loss for how to interact with Tom from now on. Since his parents talked to him, Tom's attitude towards me had changed drastically. He stopped making excuses and came to work, but he started looking at me with disdain. He ignored me or looked annoyed whenever I spoke to him. Both at home and at work. "Hey Tom, about today's work." "Don't ignore me, did I do something wrong?" "It's nothing." What is Tom thinking? Could it be that Tom has come to dislike me? No matter how much I pondered, I couldn't find an answer. However, the day came when I understood what Tom had been thinking and what he had been hiding from me. On that day, Tom came home early from work, which was unusual for him. He seemed upbeat and refreshed. When I finished work and got home, I found Tom, unusually, sitting on the living room sofa. "That's rare," I said, as he had been cooped up in his room recently. Tom turned to me with a grin and said, "Oh, you're back. I have something to tell you." "What's going on?" Tom looked at me triumphantly and announced, "I'm taking all the employees and going independent." "What?" I couldn't understand what he was saying. But Tom, amused by my shock, continued, "Oh, and write this up too." He pulled out a completed divorce form from the table drawer. "I've found a new woman. So, write this, will you?"
"Wait, what do you mean?"
"Just what I said. She's way better than you. I'm really glad I met her." I was stunned. Independence, divorce, it was all too sudden. "Oh.
Anyway, make sure to submit this divorce form.
See ya. Tom left the house, leaving me standing there, dumbfounded, in the silent room. In front of me was the completed divorce form. The sudden turn of events overwhelmed me, and I couldn't grasp the situation. What should I do now? What's the right action to take? I couldn't find any answers. But then, I thought of someone. His parents. They hadn't been at the company today, but they should be at home. With trembling hands, I took out my smartphone and called Tom's parents. Hello? After a few rings, I heard my mother-in-law's kind voice. Mom. I managed to say, tears welling up from a sense of relief as I heard her voice. What's wrong? It's about Tom. I somehow explained to my mother-in-law what Tom had said to me and the situation I was in now. I don't know what to do. Just hold on a moment, let me talk to father. My mother-in-law, sounding flustered, went to consult with my father-in-law. But quickly she came back and said, just wait at home for us. We'll come over and have a discussion together. Really? Is that okay? Yes, of course. We'll be there soon. A few minutes later, my in-laws arrived. Mom, Dad. Are you okay, Rachel? I'm fine. But as soon as I saw them, I broke down in tears. I felt pathetic for being in such a situation. They hurriedly supported me and brought me to the living room. After a few minutes, I calmed down and explained everything in more detail than before. That Tom was having an affair. That on days he said he had errands and missed work, he always came home late. That he had left with the divorce papers, telling me to submit them. And that he had announced he was taking all the employees and going independent. I was so confused, my words came out in bits and pieces. My in-laws listened intently and nodded in understanding. But after I finished, they seemed stunned and speechless. Then my father-in-law said, I'm truly sorry. Our son has. My mother-in-law also apologized. No, it's not something you two should apologize for. They bowed their heads in apology. I felt uncomfortable and quickly asked them to lift their heads. For the moment, I was relieved to have talked to my in-laws. Considering everything that had happened, I knew they would be on my side. But I was still unsure about what to do next. I needed to find out if Tom had approached all the employees about going independent, where he was now, and gather evidence of his affair. After the way Tom treated me and then thrust the divorce papers at me, I couldn't even think about rebuilding our relationship. Since Tom clearly wanted a divorce, I decided to go through with it regardless of how the situation unfolded. Naturally, I wanted the divorce to be on the grounds of Tom's fault, and I expected to receive alimony. What should I do? As I muttered this to myself, my father-in-law, who was sitting across from me, spoke up. Let's resolve this one step at a time. I'll look into Tom's situation, and Rachel, please handle the company matters. Although Tom has been talking about independence, the fact that none of the employees are stirring up suggests it might just be all talk. Understood. So, I decided to divide and conquer with my in-laws. I wouldn't let Tom get away with saying it was all a joke. When Tom first announced the divorce and his intention to go independent, I was overwhelmed by a mix of emotions and confusion. But now, things are different. I started preparing to bring Tom down to hell, fueled by my clear hatred for him. A month later, Tom was standing in front of me. I had gathered all the evidence and testimonies I could and summoned Tom to my in-laws' house. Initially, Tom continued his heartless remarks, but when I told him I would file for divorce if he showed up, he quickly changed his tune and agreed. The thought of him cluelessly showing up, not knowing what awaited him, was amusing to me. So, what do you want? I came because you called me. There's nothing to talk about, though. Where had the Tom before the business venture gone? It felt like I was in a bad dream. You've been doing whatever you wanted, haven't you? What? What do you mean by doing whatever I want? Explain yourself. Tom, crossing his legs, responded provocatively. Previously, I would have been at a loss for words, but not anymore. Having affairs, trying to go independent on your own.
What? I told you that already. You're calling that doing whatever I want?
And there's more. Stealing money and supplies, as I heard. I knew about the affairs and the talk of company independence. But as I dug deeper, I found out that Tom had been taking money from the company. When I brought up the money, Tom's face turned pale, and he visibly started to panic.
What? Why would I need to do that? Are you crazy? And do you have proof? You're not just making this up to get back at me, are you? You think I'd lie about this now? If you think I'm lying because I don't want to divorce you, you're wrong. I am going to divorce you. That's why I called you here today. Then show the proof now,
Tom said, sounding desperate. So, I showed him the security camera footage, just as he wished.
What? Cameras? Why?
You were absent from the company for a while, remember? I installed them then. I even consulted you about it, but you weren't listening. Actually, I had installed security cameras near the safe to enhance security. I couldn't just set them up without consulting Tom, so I asked him about it. He seemed distracted and just replied, "Yeah, sure," not really paying attention. But there was no doubt he had agreed, so I installed the cameras after consulting with the employees. The reason I knew Tom had been stealing money was because of those cameras. I could have just said I saw it on the cameras, but one of the employees, who Tom hadn't approached about joining his independent venture, had witnessed his suspicious behavior. This employee was an older part-timer who hadn't been asked to join Tom's new venture. You were going around asking people to join you in your independence, promising better conditions than now. Well, everyone refused. But to think the only person you didn't approach, the older part-timer, would tip us off. Is this some kind of joke? Angry Tom challenged me, and I showed him the security camera footage. I narrated it specially for him. See? You're stealing money here. Look.
Shut up,
Tom responded, clearly unable to deny the evidence on the video. He looked dejected. What were you going to use it for? Startup funds. He had been stealing from the company to fund his own startup.
Unbelievable.
I had no choice.
What do you mean no choice? Why couldn't you just continue the business as is?
Because
what? Explain yourself.
My father-in-law, who had been silent until now, clearly frustrated with Tom's evasive attitude, finally spoke up. Tom then started shaking and began to explain why he wanted to start his own business. It turns out it all started with an affair. He met a woman at a bar after work. The flirt was consulting for people like Tom who were starting their own businesses. As their relationship progressed, he began to think about starting a new business with her. Starting a business was harder than I thought. So why did you decide to start a new business? It doesn't make sense. I thought it would work out with her. It was just pitiful. A person who gives up so easily on difficult tasks wouldn't succeed in a new venture. And to think he was stealing company funds for his independence. He might cause even bigger problems in the future. You're incredibly selfish, aren't you? Were you going to see your affair partner when you said you had errands and didn't come to work? Right. I want to quickly demand alimony and have him out of my sight. Even my in-laws seem to have moved from anger to sheer disbelief about the alimony for the affair. As soon as I brought up the topic of alimony, Tom, who had been looking dejected, suddenly lifted his head to look at me. Then he said something utterly too late.
Rachel, can't we start over? I'll break up with her. I'll drop the business venture. Let's start fresh, just the two of us.
Start over? Was he serious? Was he sane? As I stood there, stunned, Tom continued.
Come on, it'll be all right. I was stupid to talk about divorce. Let's go to various places together again, make lots of happy memories. So, no way.
However, my father-in-law, angered by Tom's words, slammed evidence of the affair onto the desk.
How dare you even think of starting over after doing such things?
This is. What my father-in-law presented were documents and photos from a private investigator, detailing Tom's affair. There were photos of Tom and his mistress entering a hotel, walking arm in arm, looking happy. And a document meticulously detailing where and what Tom and his mistress were doing. There was no way he could deny it now. What? Why are there such photos? You hired a detective?
Yes, if she is to divorce and claim alimony, solid evidence was necessary. She never know when she might retract your confession about the affair. So, it's better to have a detective gather evidence, isn't it?
Why are Dad and Mom on Rachel's side?
Who would side with someone who does such despicable things?
You're a huge disappointment.
You probably said let's start over because you didn't want to pay alimony, right? What a pathetic son.
I'm genuinely grateful that my in-laws are sensible people. As soon as Tom realized they weren't on his side, he slumped again.
No matter what you do, my feelings for you will never return.
With those final words, making it clear there would be no reconciliation, Tom had nothing left to say. Afterward, I pursued legal action against Tom and his affair partner for alimony. According to my lawyer, both were reluctant to pay, but eventually, they begrudgingly agreed. It's unbelievable they would still resist at this point. Though Tom had shown a defeated demeanor during our discussion, his true colors were disappointing. A week after the divorce was finalized, Tom sent me a ridiculous email blaming me for his breakup with his affair partner, wondering what I was going to do about it. I decided to ignore him, but as he persistently sent more emails, I replied with a simple "stop being so persistent," and he stopped contacting me. Since then, there's been no word from him, but the alimony continues to be paid, so he must be managing somehow. Later, I heard from my in-laws that they had also cut ties with Tom. Now alone, having alienated his parents, wife, and affair partner. I hope Tom reflects on the terrible things he's done. I'm now leading the company Tom and I started, acting as its representative. Albeit in name only. Relying heavily on the support of those around me. But my employees all believe in me, and their trust is both heartwarming and reassuring. My former in-laws, now just strangers, still visit occasionally, concerned about my well-being. I'm surrounded by such warm-hearted people. While grateful, I continue to strive for the company's expansion.